Welcome to Narratives Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Deroy and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Leadership Story Talks Live. This is the live edition of our podcast, Leadership Story Talks, where we invite three people who have been on our podcast to tell stories. I'm Jerome Deroy, CEO of Narrative, and I'm joined by my wonderful Julienne Ryan.
And I'm Julienne Ryan, who's very excited to be here, apparently.
That's great. So very happy everybody's here. Thank you for attending on this wonderful Thursday, July 16th. Wherever you're coming from, this might be a good opportunity to get familiar with the chat if you're not. But just tell us where you're coming from today and what you're excited about finding out in this version of Leadership Story Talks Live. Really wonderful to have you. So I'll let Julienne say a few words about this event.
All right. This event is an opportunity for all of us to pause, listen, and reflect together. We're going to hear stories about vulnerability, about pivotal moments, and resilience. Our intention is to show you the humanity behind these leaders and their stories of how their events shaped their life and made meaning and connection. They are sharing stories from the heart. These are not rehearsed scripts. These are not presentations. These are pure stories, real people, real moments.
Yes, pure stories. I love that. And the other thing I'll just add to this, well, first of all, look at those places that people are coming from in the chat.
Oh, wow.
Thank you so much for showing up today. By the way, I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and you?
I am in the greater New York City area.
Great. All right. So we've got a few time zones represented here. That's awesome. So one other thing I just want to add before we welcome our storytellers is that we believe storytelling actually begins with listening. So as Julienne said, this isn't going to be your typical kind of storytelling event or performance event where maybe someone speaks and everyone sits quietly in the dark, especially in the webinar where we can't actually see our audience, but we can see you through the chat. This is going to be a little different in the sense that we're going to call every storyteller onto our virtual stage. And Julienne and I will actually stay on the screen as well as the two other storytellers when one storyteller is speaking. Why do we do that? We do that to sort of model this relationship between listening and speaking. Because the way that I listen to someone will shape how they speak, and the way that they speak will shape how I listen. So we're in this reciprocal relationship, and it also is nice for the speaker to be able to see people on screen, and that's kind of who they're speaking to, since it's not possible to see the attendees and all of you who are listening right now. But that's what we're modeling, that relationship between telling and listening, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in our reflections and at the end of the webinar and why that's so important. But hopefully you'll get to feel that and experience that yourselves as well. Back to you, Julienne.
Yes, this shared presence matters. And Jerome and I have been on recordings and events where we couldn't see the audience. We couldn't hear them listen to and hear laughter or reactions. And it's so hard. So we want to have our storytellers experience that. So we created this environment in real time. This way you feel part of the presentation and you're participating with your listening. So your attention and participation matters. And you're giving the best gift of all. You're listening and forming a connection as it goes. Whether you're sitting in your office at work and pretending you're working, but you're taking a break, or even outside. Enjoy listening and be part of this experience and keep participating in the chat.
Great. Thanks for that. And so now we invite you to take a moment to set aside any distractions. I have put my phone on do not disturb. I haven't put it on vibrate or mute, just do not disturb. So I don't know if somebody's calling me or texting me. I advise you do the same thing on your computer as well. Silence notifications, extra browser tabs that are distracting you, because you may not believe this right now, but your listening really matters to us, and especially to the storytellers who are about to go into a serious act of bravery, I would say, in terms of telling a personal story for an audience, something that really matters to them. So let's show them that it matters to us by trying to set aside all distractions so that these stories can come alive through the quality of the listening that we're creating for them. So now, Julienne, I'll let you say a few things about the flow of the event.
Alrighty. Our storytellers have committed to sharing a 6-minute personal story. They are sharing moments that shaped how they live and work. And these are moments that shaped how they became a leader and what gave their life meaning and connection. They're bringing their lived experiences to life. And we are inviting you to witness this.
Fantastic. So after each story, those 6-minute stories, we will share a few reflections along with the other storytellers on screen, and that's when you all are welcome to give any thoughts, reflections, send out some emojis, whatever you want, in the chat, the Q&A button as well on Zoom. So use all those things that you're familiar with at this point, and ask anything you like, or even if it's a word of encouragement. I would just invite you all to maybe avoid sending too many chats while the person is telling their story, because that might distract them from telling their story. So I just encourage people to do that either before the story or after the story. And of course, if we see any questions directly for the storyteller, we will relay that to them. So hopefully we can do that in between storytellers. Oh, yes. And so for those of you who, I'm speaking to those who weren't able to join live and you're on a recording right now, of course, you won't be able to participate in the same way, but we still appreciate you being here and registering. So, all right. So I think you got a couple things to say, and then we'll get started.
We are almost there.
Yeah.
We will wrap up at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Jerome is the best timekeeper. He's going to make sure that this happens. We're going to leave you with stories and insights and things that you can take with you today and beyond. Sound good?
Yes. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up all of our storytellers at once. So first, starting with George, and then Jennifer, and then Katherine. If that worked. Let me try that one more time. Yes. Okay. Great. Welcome, George, Jennifer, and Katherine. George, we're going to start with you, George Pesansky. So I will, I'm not going to put a spotlight just quite on you yet. I will introduce you so that everyone knows who you are, at least a little bit of who you are, and then they'll know a lot more of who you are after your 6-minute story. So thank you so much for being here, George. So George Pesansky, everyone, is the author of Super Performance, and he's the president of myblendedlearning.com. He's a 6 Sigma Master Black Belt and a former U.S. Army officer who's trained more than 10,000 professionals in operational excellence across 6 continents. Known for turning complex ideas into practical wisdom through everyday stories and analogies, George helps leaders and teams reach their full potential. He serves on the Forbes Coaches Council and the Fast Company Executive Board, and he is about to tell us a 6-minute story. George, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jerome. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'd like to start by saying my story begins on July 4th, 1993. And I was sitting in the commander's hatch of a 68-ton M1 Abrams tank, and we were baking in the heat of the multi-range complex in Fort Stewart, Georgia. Now, when you think about, being in that position, it was about the sound of the clicking tracks and the 68-ton vehicle's engine whining as we rolled out onto the range. And navigating a tank is not an easy thing. You have to talk internally to everyone inside of the vehicle. You also have to be able to talk externally to the control tower. And the language of radio is very precise. And it's very different than natural conversation. I finally really felt in that moment that I was able to talk naturally in both places. The people who were with me, I truly trusted with my life. My driver, Specialist Bistock, my loader, Specialist Hogan, and my gunner, Sergeant Mabry, who later would go on to become Command Sergeant Major Mabry. I was here as a bit of an experiment. And by association, my crew and I kind of were a little bit of a joke for the unit because I was a chemical officer and now I was in charge of a tank platoon, which is kind of unheard of and generally kind of accepted as something that's a bit ridiculous. I literally didn't know what end of the tank went forward when I first arrived at the motor pool. And here's what nobody saw coming. Well, most crews showed up. They did the minimum qualifications. They went home. The four of us did something different. We signed up for every open hour the simulator had available, every single one. Every crew has to annually qualify, which is basically passing a test of your skills. And in this test, there is a specific engagement where the tank commander has to take himself, the person in charge, from what is called the command override, a shot that is going to take the command of the vehicle away from the gunner and fire from your own station. Now, I ran this shot in the simulator hundreds of times with my crew, not because anyone made us, but because we knew what we were good at and what our weakness was. And we all kind of knew it was me. And we were determined as a crew to be able to demonstrate what it is we could actually do. Well, of course, the big day came, the competition, the test of this great experiment. And every crew in the squadron is going to get scored against each other, both day and night. And outside of actual combat, this is really the only test of your ability. There's nothing qualitative about it. There's no politics. It's really just a score, and it has to stand on its own. Your crew is on the same range as everyone else, and you see who wins and who loses. So on this Independence Day, we were dealt some unlucky initial circumstances. We had the worst possible position, going dead last on both runs. But going last had a strange gift that I didn't kind of think of at the time, because by the time we rolled downrange, we already knew everyone else's score. There was no mystery in what needed to be done. There was a number we had to beat, and knowing mathematically that you can win kind of brings a certain pressure, because you now know that you can lose what would have been something that you could have won. Knowing that you can't win is a little bit of a relief of pressure. So we were rolling downrange with a lot of pressure, and especially knowing that I had an amazing crew that could absolutely perform, and a great deal of this was going to depend on me. Now, it's important to recognize, I'm sure many of you have never been inside of a main battle tank, but when these four people work, it's not just everyone doing a job. It is really a choreographed ballet. And as an example, when the main gun fires, it recoils inside of the tank, and it has thousands of pounds of force and steel that travel through the middle of that main compartment. And if you're in the wrong position, if you're not communicating clearly, anyone in the way of that force could easily be crushed. So, this ballet is not just something that demonstrates your skill and ability, it is also up to us to work together to make sure that we're all both safe and effective. Now, on this day, as we're rolling down range and this ballet is being performed, this choreographed kind of dance of us working together is happening. Sergeant Mabry, my gunner, was absolutely flawless. It felt like he was working in slow motion. And engagement after engagement, he's not missing. My driver, who has to keep the vehicle stable and be on his marks, was spot on. And Specialist Hogan, who is our loader, was precise and rapid, pressing himself against the side of the turret, getting out of the way of the gun, and allowing us to engage quickly. Eventually, it came to my moment, the commander's engagement. And this was my shot to take. And after everything Sergeant Mabry and the entire crew had done, it was now up to me to win it. And it was also up to me to lose it. So I took the override, I laid the gun on the target, and I said those magic words, "On the way." And as I fired, the gases from the barrel, they always initially kind of obstruct the shot because you're looking through a thermal sight. And here's the thing, in that moment, I had no idea what had happened or whether I had actually hit the target. And when I hear that we actually hit and we scored, then I knew all of that time in the simulator, all that time working when everyone else had gone home, had paid off. And when we won that competition, when we were able to actually demonstrate our capability, the joke crew that was in the worst position on the range, the one that was being led by a chemical officer who didn't really understand even what end of the tank would go forward on his first day, had actually just outperformed all of the West Point graduates, all of those fantastic soldiers who had practiced for years, and we had finally demonstrated our full capability. Now, this was my high point in my uniform. It was not a moment of bravery like so many soldiers and airmen and Marines go through. It was not a moment of adversity. It was merely a moment of me discovering that my potential was greater than my own belief. And thankfully, my squadron commander, who had asked me to take this role, Lieutenant Colonel Blakeney, he believed in me more than I actually believed in myself. And in that moment on July 4th, in that space of actually winning this impossible competition for us to be able to win, something crossed my mind that I just never expected. That this was going to be as close to actually creating value and performing the work in uniform that I was ever going to be. Right here, right now, in this turret with these three men, every promotion after this, every job after this was going to move me further from this turret and further from the direct work of actually being able to be a part of that beautiful ballet. And in that moment, I actually realized that it was going to be my last days in uniform, that I was going to make the decision to leave the military. And a lot of people thought I had lost my mind because I was a chemical officer who had now demonstrated capability as a tank platoon leader, something that none of my peers had chance or opportunity to do. And it was going to certainly position me for many years to be able to gain favorable opportunities and promotion. And it was really going to set me up for what could have been a magnificent military opportunity. But I realized that there were some things that happened on that day that I wasn't going to be able to unsee and that I now fully understood. This was what inspired me to write my book, Super Performance, and it's actually part of my opening chapter. And it's all about the fact that we didn't win because we were gifted. We didn't win because we were, having some advantage. We won because we focused on what was working for us and the strengths that we had, and also the weaknesses, and being committed to build those strengths and eliminate those weaknesses, to show up and do what was necessary. Ordinary people prepared on purpose can do extraordinary things. And to be able to understand that I need to be able to believe in myself and to believe in others more than they may believe in themselves is what being a part of that beautiful choreographed dance on July 4th in the Georgia heat taught me. And it also showed me that you can exceed your own expectations. People will exceed their own expectations if you're able to see and believe in what people are capable of doing. So that's what I've done for the last 30 plus years. And I help ordinary teams, the people on shop floors, prepare on purpose and demonstrate what they're capable of. I try to do for them what Colonel Blakeney did for me, to believe in them more than they may believe in themselves, to give them opportunity, to show them how being committed and working toward a goal is something that you may think is unattainable. But if you take it one step at a time and you focus on what's working and you close the gap on those shortcomings you have, you're always going to be a little better tomorrow than you were today. Now, I haven't sat in a tank in well over 30 plus years, but I can promise you, every single time I walk onto a shop floor, I start working with that new team. I think about Bistock, I think about Hogan, and thankfully, I was lucky enough to have Command Sergeant Major Mabry actually give me an endorsement for super performance, and I can say I'm still close friends with him today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, audience, now's a great time if you have any questions or thoughts or reflections on George's story to put that into the chat so we can see it. I am sharing with you all George's website, where you can find all of his information, what he does, as he explained, and his book, Super Performance, that we can see behind you in your background. So while all of that is happening, actually, someone is saying that they just finished your book, George.
Wonderful.
Well, they listened to the audiobook. Great stories in the book, and appreciate you narrating the book yourself. All right. Rachel says, I love that this was a story about grace under pressure and finding the gifts. Wonderful. Well, really great story. There's just really a couple of things I just want to say, and then we'll move on to our second storyteller. First of all, thank you for sharing that story. And to me, it's just the power of taking something personal that happened, 30 years ago? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That happened 30 years ago and still influences you today, and you still think about those people and you named them, which I really appreciate, because sometimes it feels quite anonymous when we talk about people as roles or titles. But once you put a name to it, suddenly they become really human in my mind. So that's just something to remember for everyone who's trying to express their story out there. Be as specific as possible. And when you were in that tank, I was right there with you. The stakes couldn't be higher, And at first it was kind of humorous, but then you mentioned that you might actually be crushed by this thing. It's like, oh, okay, this is actually pretty high stakes. So wonderfully done. Thanks for sharing that story. Really appreciate taking us into a world that we don't get to go into that often.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to keep this going at a quick pace. So the next, I will let you, Julienne, introduce our next storyteller.
Well, thank you. Well, next we're going to hear from Katherine Carol. Katherine Carol is a nationally recognized advocate and leader in the disability, employment, and inclusion areas. She has spent her career and life helping individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities find meaningful work. She's accomplished this by partnering with policymakers, organizations, and families to develop more inclusive systems. Katherine also co-hosts the Shining Beautiful series podcast with her daughter, Mikhail, whose own advocacy work has reached Congress and the National Press Club. Please welcome Katherine Carol to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerome and Julienne. And George, your story was quite powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I was there too. I was feeling the heat. I wanted you to join me on a journey. I am in a car, my 2013 Honda CRV, and the Grand Tetons are disappearing in my rearview mirror. And my only companion in this is an astrology podcast. That gives you a clue. I had just come through Yellowstone National Park, which is one of my favorite places to visit. And it's springtime and the park is beautiful. I saw 3 black bear with the sun bouncing off of their brown fur, and they're foraging for whatever bears forage with in the spring. And of course, the bison, the beautiful rivers, and the wildflowers that had returned over a burn scar. So I was returning from what's called the Besco West Rendezvous, where a bunch of us rehabilitation professionals come to a very small place in a small state, and we gather. And it's more than a gathering, it's a regathering, because we're regathering our courage to take on some pretty difficult situations right now. And we're regathering hope and energy to move forward. And there is a man named Kerry that started all this 20 some years ago. And a few years before this, we were all gathered at this Laksa Lodge, which is a magical rustic lodge. And we're sitting there breathing smoke. And we're looking, after a full day of interaction, watching pine trees burst into flame. And they're across the river from us. And the firefighters show up in their yellow shirts and their green pants, dragging hoses, sprinklers, and we're packed our bags quietly, put them next to the door of our cabin just in case we would have to evacuate. And it was really quite amazing. So this year when we returned, we were able to do some hiking, and we went back to one of the trails that we had hiked before. And there were the trees, there were the dead trees that were thoroughly burned. There were the trees untouched. And on the floor of the forest were these dead trees that were giving life to new trees. They're called nurse trees. And they're taking the foundation of what they've lived and all the nourishment they have to give life to a new generation of trees. And it was a powerful meeting for me as I was reflecting through all this. So when we're standing through and I'm looking at these old trees and these new trees, and I began to think of Kerry even more, because Kerry was one of these people that believed in the possibilities of people. He could see the forest for the trees, so to speak. And when you meet Kerry, you don't meet him first, you hear him first. He has this amazing laughter that follows him everywhere. And when I used to work with him, we'd have that laughter echoing through the halls of our offices. And he's a brilliant man who is very curious about so many things, from fly fishing to restoring old cars to welding to economics, and mostly developing the possibilities of ideas. So when I worked with him at the university, I would be so enthusiastic about ideas. I'd go in there and he'd say, "Oh my God, you need to go now. Get out of here." And then I learned that if I would just take one idea and lob it in like a tennis ball and walk away, that later he'd come back and say, "I think we got some funding for that." So anyway, let me take you back to 1986. That's when I met Kerry. And I didn't actually care for him when I met him. So the first time I met him, I didn't think too much of him. But the second time I met him, I needed him because I had just become a single mom of 2 children, one with a disability, and I had been placed in a new job that during a recession, several men wanted, and they were setting me up to fail. And they put me in charge of an employment program, and I was a former special educator. I knew nothing about contracts, talking to employers, none of that stuff.
Just to
And
let you
so,
know, we're about halfway through. Just to let you
okay. And so I was desperate for this job. And I remember sitting in my office thinking, I have to have this job. So I called Kerry and I said, "How do I do this?" And I did exactly what he said to do. I followed him to the T, and his humor got me through it, through my disappointments. And we went from 2 job coaches to 11. We went from 10 people employed to 100 with minimum wage and benefits. It was pretty remarkable. And then, as the story goes, and then my daughter needed surgery and I had to quit. So I cared for her and I got a part-time job at Rent-A-Mom, which is a nanny placement agency. So one morning I'm answering the phone. Hello, Rent-A-Mom, how can I help you? And it's Carrie. And Carrie's going, I have a job for you. I said, where's that at? He said, at the university. I got this big grant. I need you to come. And I explained my situation. And he said, you have a master's degree, right? And I said, no, I don't. I have a bachelor's degree. And I'll get back to you. So knowing Carrie, and these were the lessons he taught me, is like, okay, there's an obstacle. You work around the obstacle. He talked the university into hiring me, which was pretty amazing. And I just love that he was always able to do that. So I was able to bring a lot of those lessons about doubting limits and going for the possibilities with my daughter doing that. I began to see the power of nursing people's abilities and not focusing on their disabilities, which would be the forest versus the trees. And so my daughter, as Julienne lovely said, has been a powerhouse herself. And she is now teaching so many other people that work for her how to go beyond their limitations and their doubts and to be a little classy, sassy, and a little badassy. That's our motto. But this is how far the roots of a nurse tree, whether it's a person or in nature, can take us. It goes from generations. So next year when we gather, all of us at the rendezvous, we're bringing the next generation of leaders forward with us. And we're planning to support them in the way that we've been supported and the way the nurse tree supports others. So we're still gathering, regathering, renewing around the seeds that Carrie planted all these years ago.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you very much. I hope you can see all the reactions I'm sending your way, and I see some hearts popping up onto the screen as well. Thank you so much for telling that story, Katherine. And I should say for the audience that you and I go a few years back now, and I had the real pleasure of working with you on a workshop for people with disabilities and in a different setting, using storytelling, and really your advocacy efforts are pretty unbelievable, and it's always so. I can say that, but it's also interesting to hear from your story who were the people that were sort of pivotal to you. And I love the idea of following this one person, Carrie, over the years. And I just have to say, I don't know if the audience caught this, but when you get that call at Rent-A-Mom and you're like, hello, Rent-A-Mom here. And then it's Carrie who says, do you want a job? It's almost like, it's bringing in something that's very cinematic into something much more of ordinary life. Because to me, it was like a heist movie. Do you want to do this last job where we're going to make $2 million? And I'll get you out of the Rent-A-Mom. And, here we go in the getaway car. And no, this is to make people's lives better and to advocate for them. And so I just absolutely loved it, and these details. And I think it's so powerful and effective in a story when you follow one person's journey that was pivotal to you. You were able to take us through many years in just 6 minutes. And also the analogy of the trees, that's also a great, effective storytelling tool, I think, when we can bring in things from nature as an image of growth, and legacy is the other one I heard. So really wonderful. And I'll leave everybody with this great motto: classy, sassy, badassy. I wrote that down because that's just awesome. So thank you very much. I don't know if the audience has anything in the chat, or Jennifer, George, Julienne, if you've got anything else you want to say while I look at these. But
I just love these playing it forward moments too. Not only the experience you had, but the fact that you found ways to play it forward for other people so they could discover their gifts and enrich for both you and George. So the pressure's on you, Jennifer, to share now. And I'm looking forward. She has an amazing story. So it's all good.
So in the chat, just want to read this to you, Katherine. We should all be so lucky to have a Carrie in our lives. Yeah. And then someone else said, love the analogy of the nurse tree, sharing what we know and what we've experienced. It's so important. and lots of hearts sent your way as well. So well done. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to remove the spotlight. We've heard from now 2 storytellers. We're getting to the second half of our show here today. It's moving at a fast clip, and sometimes it can be a little hard to bring our listening back. So I'm just going to invite you at this point to just notice where you are with your listening. Are there any obstacles? Are there any distractions? Are there anything getting in the way? Maybe just take a breath and let all that go. And again, to move those browsers out of the way, those things that are distracting you, because we have one final storyteller, and I want to make sure everybody brings their listening to her. So I'm going to put the spotlight on you, Jennifer, and then I will say a few words to introduce you, and we'll be off. All right. So Jennifer Langton is a former CFO at gaming company Atari who became a transformation leader at the NFL, where she led its head health work and built one of the most ambitious applied AI efforts in professional sports, adopted by all 32 clubs. Today, as founder and CEO of Jennifer Langton Inc., she delivers keynotes and strategic advisory using her proprietary CTG blueprint, which stands for Connect, Trust, Grow, to help leaders scale AI and transformation. Her first book, I'm happy to say, launches in March of 2027. All right, Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to share my story. It is remarkable how moments in your life and experiences can be the catalyst for change and transformation in your life. And that's why I was very excited to not only share it here, but also to draft a book and a manuscript about it. But to go back, my official start date at the NFL was Wednesday, September 9th, 2009. And it did not start, and I didn't spend that day at a desk. I joined the NFL, for just to give you some context, in finance, in business ventures to restructure the apparel strategy. Therefore, when all of the licensees and the partners at the league convene, they convene for the first time at the kickoff of the season. And that year, it was in Pittsburgh because the Pittsburgh Steelers won the Super Bowl that prior year. So it was a great opportunity for me on day 2 to be not only immersed, but completely engaged in sport. So I was credentialed and escorted to the stadium. I was taken down on sidelines, so you can imagine my eyes were open and just absorbing and taking everything in. And then I was escorted up to a suite. And in that suite, I was moving through introductions with sponsors, with licensees. Mind you, I was going to be restructuring the apparel strategy. And so I was meeting those in gaming as well, and coming from Atari, knowing many of the gaming executives, more specifically at EA, I was in my zone. And I was meeting the full constellation of the NFL's, I'd say, commercial universe. And they were not only in the commercial universe, but they were the heads of the biggest brands in sports being associated with the NFL. And I remember in this moment, I took a deep breath and I really felt, wow, I've made it. And then a moment just cut through that moment. And at that time, and the suite, you could imagine, was very engaged. But in that moment, Troy Polamalu, many of you may not know him, he was an iconic safety and in Head and Shoulders commercials because he had this billowing hair that came out of his helmet. And he had this remarkable interception in the game. And the crowd and all those in the suites literally just busted out in pride and laughter. I mean, it was this excitement. And in that moment, after the interception, he went down. And when he went down, he had a catastrophic injury for his ACL. And I watched it. And in that moment, something else happened to me. So the silence went in the suite. You could hear pins dropping. But I was no longer in that suite. I went into a moment that happened 13 years prior to me even working in the corporate landscape. I played lacrosse at the University of Virginia, And I went to the Yale Bowl. 13 years prior to that, I was going to goal and I pivoted and my opponent hit the back of my heel. And when she hit the back of my heel, my knee went in and my ankle went out. Mind you, I never had an injury in my entire athletic career as a 4-time All-American. And I don't remember, but I was carted off the field, just as Troy was. And when I was carted off the field, they took me into the Yale training room. And again, I wasn't focused on my knee as I wasn't focused on the game within that suite. Where my head next went was this moment. I've been in this room before. And the time that I was in that room was with my mother when she was alive. I went on a recruiting trip to Yale because they were interested in me joining their lacrosse team. So I had 2 moments within this suite that you don't share with others. But what resonated to me was I had never in that 13 years tied those 2 events together. Me blowing out my knee, and it was a near career-ending injury, and the sequence and the duration for which that happened in the same year I lost my mother. And so many of us do have these moments, and it's what you do with them. And that moment and that experience, although I was in finance, not only became such a catalyst of change for me and my transformation in my career, but it also became transformation at the NFL. How so? Years later, after being in finance for 4 years, the NFL was rolling out what they called a talent mobility program. And that talent mobility program gave vice presidents the opportunity to give their blue sky on what interests them. And so what did I ask for? To build the youth strategy and advance health and safety so that injuries don't happen the way that they happened to me. How could I predict and prevent what happened to the world's most elite athletes? And what is very unique about the story is that my leadership philosophy was what I needed at that time when my identity was lost at, in college, was what I learned and how I learned to lead. Connecting with others and connecting with others on who helped you at those point in time, authentically connecting so that you can build trust in the people that are helping you, but then build trust in the work that you're doing together. It is then that you grow. And so what I needed at a time that was so crucial to my development and my own learning became a blueprint for which I wrote about in my book, but a blueprint that not only led the transformation for myself, but gave me that burn and that ability to ask to create change, not for just oneself, but for the league. And so it is moments and experiences that, and I do love to share this as I'm hearing the other stories. You don't have to have lost a mother and or blew out your knee. But I took my adversity, and that adversity became the blueprint for change. It became within me. It fostered that change. And that's what I offer to others.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yes, the connections between all the stories. I mean, we've worked with each of you in preparation for this, but we never actually met all 3 together and did what we're doing now. And it's so clear, that these people who help us along the way in our development. So I love the way you ended there, Jennifer, reflecting on that, because I'm going to remember those people in the tank with George. I'm going to remember Carrie, and now I remember you, and the adversity that you had to go through, and how that became fuel for change. And I can find that in George's story and Catherine's story, and I suspect in each of our audience members' stories as well. And so I just really, that's quite a remarkable theme, and I hope everybody is inspired by that. 2 things that I just want to remark on the story itself. It's very effective when we're with you in that suite and you just tell us what's going on, and then something horrific happens on the field that doesn't really affect other people in the suite, as we can see, because we're seeing it from your point of view. But then it's 13 years back and you blow out your knee, and it's so satisfying for the audience to have that moment revealed to us of why everything became silent. And you really very effectively kind of kept us there in that mysterious moment until we discovered the reason why. And I agree with you. You know, you don't have to have blown your knee or lost your mother to find a catalyst for change, but we all have these moments. And it's about paying attention to that is sort of what I'm taking away. So
Yeah, Jerome, and if I may add to that, 'cause you hit it very, very well and on point, is we all hold those moments and there's not always opportunities for you to act on them, right? But being aware of what influenced you, how it influenced you, and how you want to help, when the opportunities then come, you're ready to leverage those opportunities. So it is that awareness, but it wasn't at the league that I ran back to the office on my third day and said, hey, guess what hit me yesterday? I'm 2 days in here and I went 13 years back. But when the opportunity presents itself, and I think that this is important for, the audience, is know those opportunities and they can become your strength and your fuel when an opportunity presents itself. And I think that that's really important for all of these stories.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful.
And Jerome, I want to just jump in for a minute to say, Jerome and I have been privileged to hear bits of these stories in different ways on the podcasts, in our prep sessions. And every time I hear these stories, I hear something new in it and fresh and insightful and make analogies. And it's a good reminder that we tell sometimes same stories, but there's a new audience, a new way of looking at things. So don't mothball those stories that you have. Find fresh ways to share them and think about them.
Yeah, wonderful. I just shared in the chat information about Jennifer as well, where you can learn more. And before that, after we finished our reflections on Catherine's story, there's also a link to her website, the shiningbeautifulseries.com. And before that, we also had George's, myblendedlearning.com and georgepesansky.com. So make sure to go and find those. We will be, just so you know, audience who's here now live, this will be published next Monday with more notes and resources where you can learn more about these storytellers. So if you haven't had time to grab all those links, you can certainly do so now through the chat, but you'll also get that by email and through our regular podcast feed. So we're getting towards the end of our list here, but I am curious, George, Katherine, if there's anything you wanted to reflect on or any thoughts that you had about the event or some of the stories you heard.
Yeah, I'd like to, thank the other speakers. Just amazing stories, and I took away the perseverance, the perseverance, to experience the injuries, the perseverance to kind of overcome the adversity, the imagery of the fire, and kind of persevering through both personal and professional challenges. And I think that's such an amazing lesson for us to all understand, that we often have more capacity to overcome adversity than we sometimes think ourselves. And I really love those stories. So thank you.
Very inspiring. Thank you. Catherine?
Felt the same way. And George, I really appreciate being taken into a world that's completely different than mine. And I can relate to the NFL a little bit because I'm a Broncos fan, and Bo Nix hurt himself after throwing a wonderful touchdown and winning a game. But so I could take myself in there, but I don't spend a lot of time in a military position and understanding that. And what I loved about that was the underdogness. You're going up against the elite. And I think sometimes it's so easy to be intimidated by people who have these credentials and who are seen as the best of the best. And here you come along and you up top. I love that upside down thing. You flipped it. And that was really great. And I love, Jennifer, that you took, such a painful personal experience, both on both counts, your physical and your emotional pain. And that you took that forward to protect other people and to change a culture. That's enormous. That's enormous.
Thank you.
Well, wonderful. And I just want to read you one message that came through the chat, who said, "This reinforces my belief that short stories can be the most powerful and impactful. Also, they are more repeatable by listeners." So there you go. Well done to all three of you. That's a great lesson as well of the power of storytelling. Julienne, do you want to say a few words to transition us out of the webinar?
Yes, of course.
Can I share mine
Oh, please,
about
yes.
one? Yeah.
Oh, sure.
No,
Please.
with George and Catherine, one, it's a pleasure to share this medium with you. And listening to both of your stories, I think that what resonates with me, and I wish we had more of these type of opportunities, is our stories are so rich and we're able to share those with others. But our stories, collectively, they're very unique and different. Like Catherine said, no, we were not in George's experience and we were not in Catherine's experience. But what I think this gives all of us an opportunity to do is our stories are a blueprint for others to connect to. And others to connect to, then to lead within leadership. Leading is leading oneself first, is to lead yourself and lead others. But if you hear rich stories, it gives others the opportunity as a blueprint for theirs to tap into their experiences and to really make an influence for themselves, for the organization, for an initiative, whatever that is that they deem is that next best opportunity for them and the unique. So I appreciate, again, having the opportunity to do so and loved hearing your stories and the influence and the impact that they can have on many. I really do mean that.
I have one more comment to say. In a world that is getting more and more dominated and isolated by technology, and where we're doing very, very short form communication through texts and emojis and stuff, I think this gives people a place to find authenticity.
Yeah.
And these, you could tell from all of us, these were important stories to us. We all had some emotion behind them. And, we carefully vetted the stories because we all have many stories, I'm sure. But this was the one that, I think resonated how lives can be changed by other people and circumstances. And like you said, Jennifer, how you can take advantage of it when the opportunity arises.
Mm-hmm.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for these reflections. Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. So we'll do our little wrap up. Julienne, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you for all these sharings. You're modeling everything we were hoping to impart today. And I know Jerome and I are incredibly grateful to George and Catherine and Jennifer for your honesty, your courage, your willingness to share personal stories, and how you trusted us with these experiences. And by doing so, you've shown us the generosity of what storytelling is when leaders stand up to share something, be vulnerable, and allow their staff, their colleagues to step forward and learn from that and play it forward. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, and thanks everyone who listened. Thanks everyone who showed up. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. So really, really appreciate it. And remember to go and subscribe to Leadership Story Talks, which is the podcast that started this all. So if you're not familiar with that, find that on every podcast platform that it's available on, and it's completely free. So please go ahead and you'll find each of these individuals longer interviews and stories on that podcast platform as well. So it's quite an archive of resources.
And one more thing. I always say one more question, but now I say one more thing. Before we wrap, we'd love you to take a few seconds to reflect on one moment, one idea, and one feeling that you may carry forward with you, and type it in the chat so we have something to take with us going forward.
Great. So while you do that, I want to tell you about one thing that we've, an innovation that we've had called the Listening Lab, which has really come straight out of this. And I think it's to your point, Catherine, actually, about, a world that's kind of dominated by technology and short form, et cetera, but also kind of what I've realized is it's often the louder voices that we pay attention to, unfortunately, or not sometimes fortunately, but not always. And there's not a lot of room for listening. We read books, we listen to podcasts, we learn frameworks, we work on our stories, But the conversations that I find change our lives rarely change because someone had the perfect advice. They change because someone listened in a way that nobody else did. And that allowed us to kind of see ourselves a little bit more clearly. And that's what we do in the Listening Lab. It's a peer group, cohort-based, small community for people who want to become better listeners. And in doing so, they become better leaders, better coaches, parents, partners, communicators in general. So it's a place to practice. Every month we come together for 90 minutes and we explore an aspect of listening, storytelling, leadership, communication. Members reflect together. They work through real conversations, real leadership challenges, and they help one another find clarity, not by giving advice, but by listening in a way that allows better questions and better thinking to emerge. So if that's the kind of space that you've been looking for, I'd love to invite you all to try it. I'm sharing right now in the chat a link to apply. And as a follow-up to this, when you get the recording, you'll also get an email that explains a little bit more about it and what goes on in the Listening Lab. But I'd love to have some of you continue on this journey with us. And the final announcement is that we have our next event happening in September. And so I'm putting the calendar link for that from our website to you. That's going to be on September 17. And Julienne, you can close us out.
This should be our motto. One more thing. Okay, I'm going to keep it short. Let's use these stories to incite listening, connection, and community. How about that? And until next time, thank you, Jerome. Thank you to their panelists, and see you all soon.
Thank you so much, everybody.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.